Hey, my name is Jeff Whitaker. I'm with NetApp. We work with the Cloud Data Services team. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about expanding your SAP deployments or expanding your SAP application environments into Azure with Azure NetApp Files. So we'll get into a little bit of specifics on the new service that we've talked about. Have anybody heard yet about Azure NetApp Files? Any of the earlier sessions? So a couple head nods, a couple not so. So I'll get into this and kind of give you some explanation about what the service is, and then get into some of the specifics around the SAP side of things. So NetApp is a data services company, a data management, or let's go so simple as say a data storage company. We've been doing this for 27 years. The last 7 years of that we've been deploying cloud-based services, so doing different levels of cloud activities. And really the goal is to be able to run, manage, deploy, monitor your actual resources in the cloud, and we do that so that you don't have to, right? So more of those SaaS models away from our past models of hardware-based appliances to now very much that SaaS solution that the goal is to have anybody be able to have access and use these functions in the cloud. So in the case of Azure NetApp Files, I'll kind of set the stage with, what have we been seeing with our customers? Some of the big things that we've seen is really around the struggle around file environments. And when it comes to file environments, moving to the cloud poses some challenges, right? Over 65% of those applications are still resident in the data center because of a lot of the issues, such as half of them being file-based or having a file requirement. And then when you look at the cloud, not being able to get the performance that you need, not being able to get the reliability, or maybe some management functions, the backup, and all these capabilities that were built into the environments when you're in the data center, but as you make the move to the cloud, it's like, hey, what, do you want to just get rid of that? No, you don't, usually. But one of the other big ones here is also, up until recently, that meant building a file server in the cloud itself. So actually going and utilizing a Red Hat Linux or a SUSE environment in order to solve your NFS challenges, just to run an application. So now what are you doing? You're actually dealing with patching again, and you're dealing with operational capabilities of an actual environment that isn't primary to what you're trying to do. And this is simply an architecture, kind of an example of what the environment looks like, right? What you're having to deal with is getting a virtual machine, deploying that Linux environment, assigning the disk, performance levels, all that to the environment, and then serving that out to your application. Really running into some of these limitations of scale, complexity. You've got to actually know something about storage when it comes to this, whereas an application team probably doesn't want to know anything about storage. And then the management overhead, as I said, now you got to deal with patching, right? You got to make sure that you're in the right versions of the kernel and all these other different details. And then trying to get performance out of that is really one of the big struggles, because you're dealing with a number of different resources. You're trying to build something on top of generic IaaS environments, and then trying to get performance out of that. So that's the stuff that we've seen from customers and why we came up with some of the solutions that we did. I think I put this slide a little bit early, but I'll jump ahead real quick. So NetApp and Microsoft have been working for a long time together, 20 years, but in the case of this context, the last couple of years we looked at this joint problem saying, NFS environments, it's a struggle. Microsoft sees over half of every single compute node inside of Azure being Linux-based, and they don't have a Linux file service, right? So that's where we started working closely together on building a solution for that based on, I think they used to call our equipment filers, so that's kind of our background. But anyway, coming up with a solution, and that solution was Azure NetApp Files. Powerful enterprise file share service, powered by NetApp, and when I say powered by NetApp, this is 100% a Microsoft offering. This is not a NetApp service. I know I got a NetApp badge and shirt on, but I'm talking about Microsoft stuff. We built the solution under the covers with the storage environments that we have. This runs in Azure data centers. It is 100% directly in the Azure. I'll show you a little demonstration in a bit. Wow, this slide got a little mangled. But anyway, so this is so you can migrate those NFS environments, right? We focused initially on getting the V3. V3 is like probably 80% of all file environments that are out there. Older, more legacy type environments, but then also doing NFS v4. We actually just rolled that out, or Microsoft just rolled that into production last week. and as well doing SMB. So being able to do the Windows environments as well. So when you're wanting to do the files, making sure that you have a single service that can solve all these challenges. One of the big ones was about providing a performance environment that fits the need of your application. We offer 3 performance tiers, a basic performance that gives you, it's actually 16 megabytes per second of throughput per terabyte, but we go all the way up to 128 megabytes per second of throughput. What we've seen, I'll show you in a moment, but performance is exceptional when we start building this out, and it's consistent. It's based on dedicated environments, dedicated equipment inside the data centers. Once this is set up, you get the performance that you've asked for, and you get it every time. The applications don't have to deal with any variance in performance. And then buried under this mangled chunk right here that you may or may not be able to read, some of the applications that we've seen from customers, one of the big ones was around SAP. SAP had every single landscape that's out there requires a Linux file environment, every one of them. So when they're looking at moving, and they've got a lot of capabilities, Microsoft has a lot of capabilities in Azure to actually take advantage of, get the performance, they didn't have a file service. So their recommendations, SAP's recommendations, was to build a file server in order to solve this. Not the best way to go about doing it, right? So that's where a lot of customers have really been jumping into the Azure NetApp Files space around the SAP architecture. And then a big one was announced yesterday. We now have SAP HANA certification for this environment. And what that means is, we can talk about performance, but we had to prove it. We had to prove that we could get sub-millisecond latencies for the access times, as well as the throughput necessary, so that now it's certified to run as a production workload inside of SAP. And when I say production, it's production on a file share environment, so you can now do scale out. Scale out HANA environments, no one in the cloud has been able to do this yet, so this is the first time this is being done. There is some bigger instances that are deployed inside of Azure, but that's in their bare metal HANA large instance environment, so a little bit separate than your typical IaaS, you pay for the resources that you need. That one's sold a little bit differently because it's a dedicated architecture. And we actually had, there was a session a little bit, that was 2 days ago, where Coke America is using those HANA large instance environments. And now that they can do scale out inside the data center, they can now start looking at moving those applications in a more pay-as-you-go type solution, which you'd expect from Azure. Some of the other applications, I said file application, anything generic, home directories, any of that stuff. Obviously there's performance areas. Do you want to pay, what do you need kind of from a performance perspective? But from the Linux side, from the Windows side, being able to centralize file shares. I did a couple of talks already this week about a partner of ours, Talon Storage, that actually does a distributed file system based on all the file environments being moved into the cloud. And database, Oracle, SQL, we have a number of different performance tests done in these environments. Virtual desktop, high performance computing. There's another session tomorrow at 1 o'clock in room 304, where our customer Repsol, they are a Spanish oil and gas company, has moved one of their heavy intensive file-based workloads, a high performance computing environment, into Azure, because the performance that they could get for their file, their seismic areas, their reservoir simulations, all that stuff required a lot of speed and a lot of files, and they're able to do that with Azure NetApp Files. As well, we went GA, or Microsoft went GA in May with the service, with 5 regions. We're now up to 11 regions, as we came out with UK South about a month ago and UK West just this week. So those are new ones that are actually allowing different areas, different regions. So we have 5 regions in America, we've got 4 in Europe, and 2 in APAC. So you can actually get the full global coverage if that's something that you need. And we are rolling these out really about 1 to 2 a month. So continuing to roll these regions to make sure that, depending on where you have data, we can actually solve for that. And and the one thing about Repsol too is that environment that they run in, 5x performance benefit they saw compared to their data center based applications surprised them. They thought, oh, we'll give it a try. It's like we want to move some stuff to the cloud, but it's, wait a minute, we're actually being able to do this faster than the equipment that we have in the data center. Obviously it depends a lot on what you have in the data center, but in general, it gave them a performance boost, and now they started making that heavy move into the cloud with those type of applications. Again, I know I'm talking about SAP today, but we're talking about a number of different applications. One thing I'd just like to highlight is Azure Storage, right, there's a lot of different options out there, from block to object to the data lake environments. Azure NetApp Files sits in that file storage environment, file storage pool. So you've got Azure Files out there, which is an SMB dedicated environment. Azure NetApp Files is another one that really addresses those performance and NFS things. I think they announced NFS and Azure Files this week as well. So there's some different use cases that they go after with this one. One of the big ones is SAP. When I mentioned performance, we've seen on a single volume, we can get 4.5 gigs of throughput for any of the application environments that are there. So something very big. This was done in a database test environment, Oracle test environment, where we actually were able to get heavy throughput. Much better than any of the customers have seen up until now from a dedicated environment like this. So really get the performance. And then on the other side here, you see, you probably can't read from back there, but sub 1 millisecond latencies, depending on the data center. We've been seeing all the way down to like 400 microseconds for the actual access times. So database is really one of the big ones that comes out of this. And obviously, it meets that key performance index for SAP. So just to, let me jump. I'm going to bounce around real quick here for a second because I put a slide in the wrong place. So this is a slide that actually talks about all the different migration paths that Microsoft sees with their customers moving into Azure. You know, whether it's customers that are utilizing their current environment, whether it's an R3, like one of the older architectures where they have in the data center. You know, every customer that's using SAP today has to make a migration into the S4 HANA environment by 2025. So it's really a big push, typically in an area where customers do not want to change, right? This is core environment. It's a massive, you know, loss of something. There's a hiccup or issues. So when there's this opportunity that they have to make a change, we've seen a lot of customers making that change into the cloud as they go. So whether it's going, as I said, that current environment into the cloud, a lot of customers we don't see doing that lift and shift type situation. They're actually taking a lift and maybe clean up. You know, you don't want to bring all that garbage that's been in your database for the last, 15 years. You want to actually kind of clean that up, move it into the cloud. So we see a lot of customers making it in that direction. Or we've seen customers that have said, you know what, let's at least make that move into HANA, right? Let's go ahead and say, let's start now. We'll keep our Oracle database or whatever that it's running on, move the HANA environment, get that set up, get that running, and then at a later date, they'll actually make the move into S4, and make the full complete move. And then we have some customers that we've seen that'll actually make the whole move, everything all at once. But the key thing here is every single one of these decisions, you do need to keep that file requirement in mind, because it doesn't matter which one of these you're making the move in, every single one of these situations has a file requirement. All right, bounce back time. Okay. So just a couple of things that I'd like to touch upon here is from the standpoint of what Azure NetApp Files can provide you. I talked a lot about performance, but also we made this very simple, and I'll touch upon that in a second. Made it very simple to use, so the actual SAP teams or the database teams or whatever teams you have actually managing the environments can actually do this themselves. You don't have to say, you got to know storage in order to actually deploy a volume. That's one of the games that we play over in our booth in 1047, is to play a game of saying how fast can you do it, whether you know anything about it or not. I think we had a guy yesterday that doesn't actually work in the IT side of the business. He won an actual speaker because it was really that easy to do. But also performance, as I mentioned enough times, enterprise management. One of the big things that we do inside of Azure NetApp Files is snapshots. Everybody does a snapshot of some way, shape, or form. In our case, we actually don't add capacity to your footprint. When you're in the cloud, that's a big one, right? Everything that you have in the cloud, you've got to pay for. Every bit, every byte. So most data environments, actually, when you do a snapshot, it actually copies the data and creates a new pool of data that you got to pay for. They give you discounts on that. They make it a little bit more affordable. But in our case, we actually don't do any of that. We just take a snapshot in place. You got a lot of different places that you can recover from, but you don't have to add cost to your overall budget in that situation. So it really allows you to do things a lot more often and have much more granular point-in-time backups. And then, of course, we have tools that can actually integrate that into the HANA environment as well. We can take clones of that. That's a big one for anybody that's doing, hey, I've got to roll out a new version or I've got to upgrade the version. I want to move this into a separate environment, test it before I actually make that move happen. You can actually take the production data set, take a snapshot of it, clone it 50 times or 100 times or whatever you want to do. Every one of those clones is zero space again. It's all based on the original data set, but we actually don't add any new data to that. So again, making it very cheap and very easy to do these things, and you can go out there and say, hey, let's do a full production run on this, make sure the new application version is acting the way we want to in our environment, shut all those servers down, move it into production at that point in time. So different things that we do, and then some replication tools. We've got replication to move data in and out of the cloud environment. We actually will be coming out pretty soon here with some very integrated replication tools into the actual Azure NetApp Files environment. So we solve a number of challenges. I think I'm talking fast, so I can get to my demo real quick. But anyway, so application servers. So if you want shared files, any database environment, we can utilize those. But now that it's certified, we actually can do that HANA scale-out environment. So you can go out there and get the memory-based compute nodes that meet your requirements, and you can scale those out based on a single data set. So put 5 or whatever the number is. Put a number of those together to get that beyond what a single environment can get you inside of Azure. So that's really a big one because we can meet those requirements for the data and the log environments. I talked specifically about this one a little bit, but one of the big things that we've seen from the customers is just as simple as backing up, doing a HANA backup, is they were going through, and the time that it took using their backup tool suites was anywhere from a full day to do a backup of that. When they actually ran their tests on the Azure NetApp Files environment, it dropped them down to 2 hours. Because basically, again, as I said, you're not actually copying data in these situations. You take a point in time instance, you actually just need to get the database back to a given point in time when you want to recover from. There's all the SAP layers that you've got to deal with there, but from the data piece of it, we don't have to add a lot of time in order to recover that point. But it really allowed them to do a few different things. They did the testing there, as I said. This given customer basically started to look at moving a lot of their stuff off the dedicated HANA environments and moving those into the Azure NetApp Files on a more traditional Azure environment as well. So moving into the M2 series or the M series compute nodes, and then using Azure NetApp Files as the data set behind it. I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to jump right into our demo. Let me take a second here to switch over. I just really want to, I'm not going to show you an SAP demo per se. I'll just show you how really easy it is to deploy actual volumes in Azure NetApp Files. So I know you're not going to be able to read all this up here, but I'll just kind of talk you through it as I go. This is the Azure portal you guys are familiar with. One thing I like to highlight, if we jump into all the service over here, you go into the storage services, there's Azure NetApp Files along with all the other storage services that they offer. So again, this is not a NetApp offering, even though I like to stand up here and talk about it. We have a couple different constructs up here. There's a definition of what's kind of a storage account. That account is essentially assigned to the different regions where you deploy. So you'll set up your regional accounts for the different areas that you deploy this. You can set up multiple accounts depending on how you want to track things. Obviously, it's not like a subscription. You're not paying based on these things. You're paying on your overall subscription. But at least you can track and monitor and see what's going on in each individual account. And right now, I have a Ignite 2019 account. I'm going to have to see how many people, with all the demos we got going on over there, how many people have created a bunch of stuff. So then we come down to a capacity pool. A capacity pool, think of it as a pool of like capabilities. This is where we actually set the performance profile. So think about if you're just doing shared files, you're going to set a standard profile at this point. You want to keep probably your cost down and get those capabilities. I've got an Ignite pool here. It's the standard tier. But think about a database team. You say, you know what, let's set this up for the database team. It's like, here's a pool for you guys. You can go create the volumes all you want to. You could set up scripts to do this, with the Azure CLI, or you could do it directly out of the portal itself. But you can set that pool up for them and set it at the performance level that they require. So just thinking of different ways that you can utilize the pools. And then I'll jump in here to the pool. And so far, it looks like they did a cleanup today. There's only 3% of that pool utilized. So let's jump in. So in here, you'll see the volumes. So we've got several volumes over here. And we actually have a game going called a Spin It to Win It, where I was telling you the one person won some money, won a prize over there. This one is where we start the game, where we actually will time you and see how fast you can do this. But adding a volume is very simple. I can use all defaults, and all I need to do is come in here and give it a name. So we'll call it Jeff Vol 1. And at this point, I can see, you can't see this, but in the next one here, this is the available quota. It says how much capacity is available for you to deploy in. So when you go to those database teams and you say, here's your pool, they see they've got 5 terabytes of data. They still have space to utilize. I'm going to set up a 1 gig volume. And this is going to, I'll just choose the subnet that this ties into, or the virtual network and the subnet that this ties into. One thing I can do here as well is, if I want to get more complex, go in and say, oh, I want NFS v3, or do I want NFS v4.1, or maybe I want SMB. And SMB, usually you're probably not going to have the red box here because I don't have an Azure Active Directory signed to this account. So this is one of those things where you can actually go up and tie that in with your Active Directory environment. So let's go ahead and jump back to, let me just start over here real quick. I know it's going to get rid of everything. All right, so add a volume. Let's give it a name. I just deleted that one, so I'm going to call it Jeff Vol 1. And I'm going to make it a terabyte. So let's go ahead and create it. Now we're going to do a quick check, make sure that you're not breaking any rules, and create the volume. Literally, those are all the steps that are required. Yes, you can go in with the NFS environment and set up your export policies. Yes, you can tie this to an SMB, or tie an SMB environment to an Active Directory. So you can do more here, but from a simple standpoint, it's very simple, very easy to actually go out and create a volume. So we now see that, oh, there we are, we're done. So what was that, 30 seconds? 30 seconds, you got a volume up and running. What this did in those 30 seconds is go off to the NetApp equipment sitting in the Azure data center, create a volume in there for what you're asking for at the performance levels that you need, and then going off, passing it back to Azure and saying, give me the network details, give me all the capabilities to tie that into your private network and your subnet. Whoops, one thing I want to show you real quickly here is, and then I'm done. I'll let you guys run off. So I'll go into the volume. One of the big pieces that I like about the volume is you'll see over here is we've got a thing that's called mount instructions. So when you set up all your export policies, you set up all the details about that volume, the IP addresses associated with it, we're actually going to create all the mount instructions for you so that you can just go in there and cut and paste those and drop those into your virtual machine environment. And now you have a shared environment that you have access to. And that's literally it. So let me jump back to my slides and wrap this up for you guys. So just to summarize, so again, every SAP landscape requires a file services environment, right? Everything needs an NFS file share. They need, or the big piece here is getting consistent performance from those file shares, being able to hit those HANA KPIs and being able to hit them all the time. And then it's all built on our enterprise equipment. So you know that every volume that you create is highly available from the get-go. You could set up solutions to replicate outside of just the individual availability zone, but it is highly available inside the actual data center environment from the start. And then as well, shared access to data across those SAP landscapes, giving you the ability to create a scale-out environment. And if you want to learn more, one thing I didn't mention before, if you go to the actual Azure environment and you have not used this before, it is a whitelisted component. It is generally available, but Microsoft has basically a controlled release on this one. So all you do is you go in, it takes a few minutes, takes an hour or whatever, to get whitelisted onto your account, and then you can go out there and actually deploy and utilize this environment. But anyway, to learn more, go to Azure at Microsoft.com. There's a bunch of information there, reference architectures. We have a site as well on cloud.netapp.com where you can get a lot of this information as well. But I think that's about it. Thank you, guys.